Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 100 Debates on the Environment and More. We are all very excited about you joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that the North Oakville Burlington riding resides on. As a community, we have the responsibility to honor, care for, and respect all that the creation provides us with life. This includes the land, water, air, fire, animals, plants, and our ancestors. The Anishinaabe peoples have utilized this land for millennia, and we would like to acknowledge their direct descendants, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land upon which we live, work, and conduct ourselves. We acknowledge our treaty relationship and responsibilities to both the land and these original peoples. We also recognize that this land is rich in pre-contact history and customs, which includes the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. And since European contact has and continues to become home for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. It is in the spirit and intent of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, whereby we will collectively care for and respect the land, water, animals, and each other in the interest of peace and friendship, and for the benefit of not only ourselves, but our future descendants.
Now, Pam, you can hear me. People can hear me. Right, my name's Rob. I'm one of the moderators this evening, along with Souza. Apologies, I'm not sure what's happening with the slides, but we plan to walk through. I'm going to walk through the agenda and exactly what's going on this evening. In the interest of not having slides, I'll kind of go through a few other. I'll go through things now. Basically, debate's starting. I'll do the intro. We will meet the candidates. And then we will get into questions and then closing remarks, and then the debate will be adjourned. Myself, I am a board member of the Halton Environmental Network, general manager of eBay Canada, where the environment's very important to myself, also important to eBay, sustainable economy, and circular economy is very key. And then Souza, my partner, is a Generation Green Youth Mentor, and will be moderating the debate this evening. In terms of how questions will be asked, there are two types of questions that we'll be asking this evening as part of the 100 Debates on the Environment. The first two questions are common questions that are going to be asked across Canada. So 100 debates happening across Canada. The Halton Environmental Network is very proud to be helping host all 5 ridings within Halton. That's important for us. The last 5 questions have been raised by partners, members of the public that submitted questions in advance. So a couple other things to note: that the Halton Environmental Network, all our partners, supporters who've been working very hard over the past few weeks, calling all the candidates, requesting their engagement for tonight's debate. And we really want to thank the candidates that are here this evening. They agreed to come. It's a busy time, back to school, people are going back to work. So we really appreciate them coming out tonight to talk to us about climate, the environment more. They've made time in their busy schedules to join us. We really appreciate that. We are recording this session so that others can view it later, and it will be on the HIN website. You'll be able to see that. Other points. Oh, the last 5, there are other questions we'll ask at the very end that were submitted in advance of tonight's debate, just from the public. So that's key. And that, what else? Other general Zoom considerations. I wonder if I could actually share. I might try and share my screen. I'm going to go rogue on you here, Stephanie, who's helping us moderate. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see here. Can you guys see that? Yeah, Pep's on it. Okay. All right, the moderator, I've taken over. So that'll help. So this is what I was saying before about how will we be asking the questions. And then if I can try and advance this, a few things about Zoom. If you haven't used Zoom before, be in gallery mode. So when you're in the meeting, up in the top right, you can see gallery mode. It allows you to see all of the candidates at once. You can see facial reactions, zoom it in, you can get, and that's, if you were in person, you'd see some of that body language, and try and put it in gallery mode so that you can see everybody's reaction at the same time. Before we got on, it was interesting to note that this is actually the first time all the candidates for North Oakville, Burlington are going to be together and are going to be discussing top issues. So I'm pretty excited to hear what they have to say. Also, a little bit about Halton Environmental Network. We strive to make the community of Halton a region with educated citizens, engaged stakeholders, really best practice policies for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and environmental sustainability. So we do everything we can to, as a network, like bring people together. You know, let's work together. Let's work together to make something happen across Halton. Those are some of the groups that we work together with there, as well as the various municipalities, etc. So without further ado, now each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. We do have a timekeeper who will be helping with that, Rose, who's going to be helping out with that. So first off, and this was chosen in random order before we came on the screen this evening. First off, Gilbert Jubenville from the PPC.
Good evening, and thanks for the invitation. My name is Gilbert Jubenville. I'm the returning candidate for the People's Party of Canada. I've lived in Oakville since 2004, and I have 2 children, 13 and 16. I'm a civil engineering technologist with over 25 years experience in civil engineering, specializing in sustainable site development. I'm looking forward to a lively debate on a topic that's really close to my heart, the environment. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Next up, Pam Damoff from the Liberal Party.
Thank you so much. I'm Pam Damoff, and I'm the Liberal candidate for Oakville North Burlington. I want to start by thanking the organizers and those watching and my fellow candidates. I've had the great privilege of representing our riding since 2015. One of the reasons I ran for office was to combat climate change. We must finish the fight against COVID and build back better. As Parliamentary Secretary at Indigenous Services Canada, I know that the inclusion of Indigenous peoples and respect for Indigenous rights is essential for a just transition. We're at a pivotal moment in time faced with 2 global crises, climate change and loss of nature. Our government has accomplished more on the environment than any government in Canadian history, without question. I'm proud of our record and our comprehensive plan for further action on climate, nature, water, plastics, and toxics. I welcome the opportunity to share the work we have done and the work we will do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. Next up, Bruno Souza from the Green Party, please.
Hey everyone, and thank you for hosting this event. I think it's a very important topic of discussion. My name is Bruno Souza. I'm a resident of almost 34 years here in Oakville. I'm father, husband, entrepreneur, adventurer. I love nature, fell in love with it in Scouts. But for 30 years or more now, we've been seeing the climate change and nothing really being done about it. In 1988, when the IPCC was launched, Canada was kind of at the forefront of things. In 1992, we were the first to sign those agreements. And right now, we're at the back of the pack. There's no explanation for it. So that's why I'm here. I'm here for leadership. I'm here for accountability. I'm here for partisanship and multi-partisanship work across multiple government levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Next up, Lene from the NDP.
Hi there. I'm Lene Dupuis, the candidate for Oakville North Burlington NDP, and I want to be your next member of Parliament. Thank you for hosting this wonderful event, and I love that you've stepped up in this time of change for virtual debates. I know that a lot of time and effort has gone into coordinating it. A little bit about me. I've lived in this riding for over 17 years. I'm a mom, a wife, a community activist, and I'm involved in Rotary, Chamber of Commerce. I'm a sports mom. I'm active throughout the community and doing a lot for our area. I'm a human resource consultant, but I also have an environmental waste management background. So I am aware of what the community needs. And, you know, in every corner of the country, families are worried about jobs, health of our loved ones, the climate crisis, and the public services that everyone counts on. And, you know, really, I think those are all really our main subjects, and all of them are interweaved with whatever we do. Thank you.
Sue, I'll pass it to you, Sue Hoff, for the first question.
Zoom's not working.
Thanks, Rob. So our first question comes from the Halton Environmental Network as well as GreenPAC. And it is, COVID-19 has showcased how interconnected global crises can be. It has shown how vulnerable our world can be, how people are affected by crises differently, and how the populations can adapt and work together to protect the common good. With so much learned from addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, what lessons do you believe we should apply to the climate crisis, and how would you follow through with them if you were elected? Gilbert, would you mind starting us off?
I'm the host of this.
Sorry, could we get Stephanie to mute just before there's a lot of background noise?
Thank you. Can we restart the timer? The lesson we learned from COVID-19 is that we want to apply to anything involved with climate change is that we need a very restrained government. What we've seen over the past 18 months is unrestrained government at all levels. Not only have they imposed several burdens on the people, like lockdowns, it is not even clear that lockdowns were successful. We have also seen that politicians will tell us that we're all in this together when the cameras are on. But as soon as the cameras are off, they go on with their lives with no regard to what they say in public, leaving us to pay the cost of their mandates. If elected, I will work every day to rein in government to prevent them from pursuing policies detrimental to the well-being of Canadians and the people of Oakville, North Burlington. One question that I would ask before any policy or mandate, the question is, at what cost should this policy be adopted? As we've seen with government response to COVID-19, there has been almost no consideration at all of the harms imposed by the government, which is an outcome that I feel cannot be repeated when dealing with climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam, do you mind going next?
Sure. Thank you. The pandemic has shown us that we can work together to solve difficult issues. All levels of government, citizens, businesses, and all Canadians pulling together for the common good. Since last September, our Liberal government spent $53.6 billion towards a green recovery from the pandemic. The massive capacity of government to respond to a crisis and the importance of multiple levels of government working together is something that we learned through COVID and we can apply to this, to the climate crisis. That's something that I practice as a member of Parliament for Oakville, North Burlington, working across party lines and with provincial and municipal colleagues on everything from tackling the issue of youth vaping or securing funding for electric buses in Oakville. The pandemic exposed the deep pre-existing inequalities in our society, and we need to ensure that we include everyone as we transition. One of the things I'm proud of is that we will require the Minister of Environment and Climate Change to examine the link between race, socioeconomic status, and exposure to environmental risk with new legislation to address environmental justice. We will strengthen legislation to protect our environment and recognize for the first time in federal law the right to a healthy environment. Indigenous peoples have been particularly hard hit by climate change. I've advocated for a whole of government approach to Indigenous issues, and I'm pleased to see the commitment that a re-elected Liberal government will take a whole of government approach to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People by including it in every cabinet minister's mandate letter. Together, we can accomplish so much more to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruno, would you like to answer next?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I think we've learned a great deal during this pandemic, not only here at home, but even across the globe. I don't think we've ever pulled together at a scholarly level to get to a vaccine so quickly in our history. When we can see that when serious crises occur, we can pull together, we can put our differences aside, we can make information readily available for free. Information that has in some cases since gone back to being locked down. But I think that alone is already a huge takeaway from the pandemic. And I wish we could apply it to things like social and environmental injustice, because these crises can too be corrected through multi-partisanship work across all parties and across all governments with all peoples. And in the case of respecting treaties and honoring the land, I think no one can say that we have a better platform to do that. And I appreciate the Liberals borrowing from the Green platform on a regular basis. In fact, they even refer to it as the Green Recovery on their own platform. And I think that we are headed towards the right destination when it comes to this. But we do need to expedite this, and we need to work with it at community and with the people of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. And Lene, would you like to finish this off?
Sure. I believe that the biggest lesson we learned from the pandemic is that we cannot keep putting our populations and our planet second. The consequences of decades of cuts to our social safety net while spending billions on fossil fuel subsidies and pipelines have been evident over the last 2 years as COVID-19 and the climate emergency has resulted in unprecedented insecurity and worry over the state of our future. I believe 2 lessons have to urgently be applied to the climate crisis: putting people and the planet first with no exceptions, and also understanding that this is a collective fight. To follow through the first lesson, we will significantly expand our social safety net, while also immediately eliminating all fossil fuel subsidies and banning single-use plastics, as well as reviewing financial legislation, ensuring corporate climate accountability, and making big polluters pay. We will reduce our emissions by at least 50% from 2005 levels by 2030 and power our communities carbon-free by 2030. To follow through the second lesson, we see this as a collective fight with provinces, municipalities, and Indigenous people. We will build reconciliation into the heart of our climate crisis with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis as full and equal partners. We'll ensure this through a variety of initiatives, from expanding the Initiative Guardians program, ensuring Indigenous people have a seat at high-level decisions, and create an Office of Environmental Justice to address the disproportionate impacts of pollution and loss of biodiversity on low-income, racialized, and other marginalized communities. The emergency of these issues have to guide our policy responses from now on. We simply cannot afford not to. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Rob, would you like to ask the next question?
Okay, thank you very much. Second question, again, is from GreenPAC, 100 Debates on the Environment. In Canada and around the world, we've seen fires, extreme weather, droughts, infrastructure challenges, and more. The effects of climate change cannot be denied, all the while our greenhouse gas emissions are still rising in Canada. How will you ensure that we accelerate climate change mitigation, we build resilient communities, and we implement rapid, tangible solutions that include a just recovery for all Canadians? Now, the order will shift by 1. So this time we're going to start with you, Pam, please.
Well, thanks a lot. Climate change is the greatest long-term threat that we face as a global community, and we have a plan. Canada's leading energy economist gave our plan an 8 out of 10, the best of all political parties. In fact, the NDP only got 2 out of 10. A green and just transition is essential for Canada. Since 2015, our government has invested well over $60 billion to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in the development of clean technologies, while helping Canadians and communities adapt to a changing climate. An essential part of a just transition is respect for and recognition of Indigenous rights. We passed the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People legislation in June of 2021, following extensive distinctions-based consultation and input from Indigenous partners. Part of my work on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee allowed us to have a rigorous examination of the legislation. We implemented a price on pollution, with 90% of the revenue generated from the price on pollution going back to individuals in the form of a rebate, with the other 10% invested in the community. We need to train workers so they have the skills to work in zero carbon industries. And a great example of this was the $1.8 billion investment in Ford of Canada here in Oakville. $300 million of that coming from the federal government to secure 5,400 jobs for the future as the company transitions to zero emission vehicles. We will protect workers by advancing Canada's first just transition legislation to support local and regional economic diversification. As I said, we have a plan and we have the ability to implement that plan for all Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Next up, Bruno.
Right, thank you for the question. So yeah, going forward, I mean, one of the things we have to look at first with everything that's going on around us is the time that we need to spend in rolling out and mobilizing any effort. So I think right off the bat, one of the things we could do in government is transition away from those fossil fuels immediately. So instead of paying out 20 billion in subsidies to fossil fuel industries, transfer that money and add it to maybe the 60 billion that are already being spent. Now we can have a real green transformation occurring that should help curb our 60% greenhouse gases by 2030. It'll be in line with our transition to electric vehicles by 2030 and the move away from fossil fuels in general by 2035. So these transformations alone will create a variety of jobs across Canada. We plan to put an entire grid that is green energy powered across east to west. So all these jobs will have to be outfitted by people that will be transitioning from the fossil fuel industries. We create incentives for learning and for commercial entities to work with us in that transformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Next up, Lene.
Hi, we have a bold view for a just transition in combination with a green economic recovery through significant federal investments in clean energy, climate resilience, social infrastructure, and energy efficiency in communities across the country. We will invest in public transit and large-scale retrofits, build climate-friendly, affordable housing, modernize, expand, and electrify transit by 2030, make it get easier to get a zero emissions vehicle, and boost Canadian manufacturing. These investments will tackle the climate emergency while ensuring a green recovery by creating over 1 million good jobs, with the rewards going to ordinary people working towards a better future, not to big polluters, and ensure that those impacted by the transition are not left behind by expanding EI and retraining and job placement services and protecting workers. And critically, they will be directed towards reducing inequality and honoring Indigenous rights. To build resilient communities and further mitigate the effects of climate change, we'll work with provinces, municipalities, and Indigenous government to establish a national crisis strategy to ensure communities have the resources necessary to plan for and adapt to the changing climate and weather extremes, such as floods and wildfires, and provide long-term funding for adaptation, disaster mitigation, and climate resilient infrastructure. We'll also work with the Indigenous leadership and communities in this plan with coordinated action plans informed by Indigenous, traditional, and ecological knowledge and legal systems. We will do all of this by working together with Indigenous rights, reconciliation, and tackling inequality at the heart of our climate crisis plan. We are aiming not to return to normal, but to better.
Thank you. Yes, we've seen fires, extreme weather, droughts, and such in Canada and around the world. But these events, anything out of the ordinary? No. In America, it's true that in 2020 and 2015, the US saw more than 10 million acres of forest burned, which is notably higher than the average burn since the 1980s. Are the current results the worst of all time? No. And every year from 1926 to 1952, the US had more burned acreage than any year in the past 35 years, peaking out at 52 million acres burnt in the 1930s. Are people dying more climate-related causes now than in the past? No. In the 1920s, the average of more than 500,000 people died. annually from climate-related causes around the world. And in the 1930s, an average more of 470,000 people died from climate change's causes. By the 2010s, fewer than 45,000 people died annually from climate-related causes around the world. After accounting for the increase in global population, the current rate of climate-related deaths is under 3% of what it was in the 1920s. Yes, of course, every death counts, but the facts are clear. We're not given a safe climate that we make it dangerous through our actions. We're given a dangerous climate that we attempt to make safe through our actions. A final note is that the Liberals talk about inclusion in this environmental green plan, but at the same time, they want to segregate unvaccinated groups out of society. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Suha, you want to go to the next question?
Of course. The next question comes from one of our partners. Sorry. Every citizen and every party needs to be mobilized to fight the climate crisis. How will you work across the partisan divide to do this? If Bruno could start us off.
Thank you for the question. So going back to what I said earlier, one of the big components is communication with the population. And I think that's something that we've kind of failed in government. We haven't done enough of an awareness and educational campaign on environment and how everybody can contribute to the problem. I think here in Halton, we're doing actually a pretty good job. And what Burlington's pulled out is great. I'm hoping Oakville does similar as well. But we are engaging the community in a great way. We're getting great volunteer force. And this educational process actually helps us mitigate issues as well. We'll see more people taking up electric vehicles, using transit, remotely working, etc. And all of these can contribute to a better outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Lene, would you mind going next?
Sure. One of the areas I think that we could work in a non-partisan way is to work at the many different levels of government. So working with municipalities, working with provinces, and then working across the House to discuss and talk about the best ways of making our future better for multi-generations. I believe also that if we implement some different elements at a legal level, so bringing in different coalitions and committees into Parliament, I think it could work across the board. And I would be very happy to work with any of the other parties to work on this climate emergency, because it's really our future, and I think we need to action it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene. Gilbert, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, fantastic question. The name is actually in the name of the party, the People's Party of Canada. So of course, it's for every Canadian. And right now, 30 to 35% of Canadians don't vote. Why don't they vote? They're disenfranchised with the current system. And I'm gonna say this all night. The Liberals and probably every party right now, except for the PPC, are talking about inclusion, but when it comes to the vaccine unvaccinated, they're going to be segregated from society. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam, would you like to answer?
Sure, thank you. I'm really proud of my history of working across party lines. I have worked with a Conservative member in order to get a bill passed on increasing the number of organ donors. I've worked with Elizabeth May to ensure that domestic violence was taken into account in our firearms legislation. I was really proud to work with the New Democratic Party and Finn Donnelly in ensuring that we banned shark fin imports into Canada. And so what we did was we took his private member's bill, and I worked with the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change to have it included in our government bill in 2019. Here in Halton, when I was concerned about youth vaping, I realized that the only way we could address that issue was to bring all parties together. And so I convened on several meetings between federal, provincial, municipal, school boards, including groups like the Canadian Cancer Society and other stakeholders, to really get to the bottom of what we needed to do, because just like climate change, we need multiple parties working on these issues. I founded the All-Party Cycling Caucus and was really proud to work with that and see in just the last few months the first ever active transportation or cycling and walking strategy that was introduced with $400 million attached to it. I'm a former municipal councillor, and so since I was elected, I've worked with the town of Oakville and the city of Burlington. If there's a problem to be tackled, I'm happy to work with whoever is willing to work with me to get it done, and we will get the job done when it comes to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you all candidates. Rob, would you like to ask the next question?
Definitely. Thank you, Suha. The next question came from the community in questions that were submitted beforehand. And that question, what is your plan to end or transition the extraction and use of fossil fuels in Canada? And how would your government support workers and communities whose main industry may not exist in 30 years because of this? Where are we now? We are shifting. 4 is going. 4 was Lene.
It is Lene.
Yeah.
I'm just looking here. So, you know, we really do have to shift away from fossil fuels, and we seem to be putting a focus on the big polluters, sorry, not commuters, polluters. And we want to actually stop this. So what we really want to do is reduce our emissions by at least 50% from 2005 to 2030 to meet the 1.5 degree target necessary to prevent catastrophe by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, and redirecting funds to low carbon initiatives and putting in place carbon budgets. We also want to review financial legislation, so the Bank of Canada Act, the EDC Act, Investment Board Act, to ensure that federal financial levers and crown corporations are aligned with the goal of net zero. We also want to make big polluters pay their fair share. And ensure that large businesses receiving recovery funding agree to plan for net zero. So, you know, a lot of it is about working on getting the big polluters to pay, to put it back into our economy. And what we want are to transition people. So we want to create at least 1 million new jobs through this transition. So make cars net zero within the next 10 years. To retrofit buildings. So all of these things that we're doing and we're putting into the economy will also generate new jobs for people. Electrifying buses, making more electrified transit systems such as trains, you know, Greyhound closed, so maybe bringing in a more electrified bus for cross-country transit. Thank you. Sorry, Rose. I saw you that time though. Sorry.
Thank you, Lene. Next up, Gilbert.
Well, there's so much to talk there in 2 minutes. I'll try to make it quick. I spent 25-30 years in sustainable site development. I've worked on wind turbines and solar panels for the largest engineer consulting firms on the planet, Wood and Hatch. 2000 was the first time I worked on a wind turbine project. And I've also, of course, worked in mining. Our mining is sustainable, our pipelines are safe, our oil and gas is ethical. What I noticed, because I worked through a couple of boom and bust cycles, when the economy is booming and everything is being done again sustainable, then we have funding for environmental projects. If you want environmental projects to move ahead, you want a good economy. The People's Party of Canada are going to build pipelines. They're going to get the Alberta oil and gas going again, which is ethical oil. Remember, we're shipping in Saudi oil in Quebec. We're going to build pipelines that are safe. When the economy is booming, it gives us money for environmental projects like solar panels and wind turbines. As soon as we hit a recession, whether it was year 2000 or 2008, the first projects to go are environmental projects. I'm telling you this right now. We need a good booming economy to save the environment. I know it sounds counterintuitive. One of the stats that I love stating is about North Korea and South Korea. If you think this is a moral argument, North Korea right now has 5 to 10 times the CO2 rate. So pick a country that you want to live in. What is moral? What is more ethical? Right? Is it North Korea or South Korea? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, Pam.
Thank you. Our government is committing to phasing out fossil fuels and achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We've set a new, more ambitious target to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. We've committed to eliminating inefficient fossil fuel subsidies by 2023. And we've already phased out 8 corporate income tax breaks for the fossil fuel sector. Now, some measures that are described as fossil fuel subsidies are actually key parts of an effective climate change plan and are intended to reduce emissions. We've invested $1.7 billion for orphan and inactive wells cleanup. And I've heard from people, well, why aren't the oil companies doing that? And the fact is that they're often not around to do it anymore. And a recent example of that is an explosion just in southwestern Ontario, in Wheatley, Ontario, just recently, that injured 20 people and destroyed multiple buildings with an abandoned gas well that was improperly plugged. I've already given an example of our investments in Ford of Canada here in Oakville to transition 5,400 jobs to creating electric zero emission vehicles. And we've also committed to a just transition through legislation and consultation with workers and labor groups that will grow clean energy jobs and offer retraining. We need to make sure that we're including everyone as we transition to a greener economy, and we don't leave anyone behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. Next up, Bruno.
Thank you for the question. So on the question of transformation, I think that the people are going to be the first thought for me and my party. We're going to make sure that all of the incentives and subsidies are created to make sure that we have training in place, to make sure that the commercial entities themselves have the incentives to move over to these new technologies, to these new energies. And we also need to have research and development to facilitate the process. I think that when it comes to green technology, it seems to be the work mostly of universities lately. We don't see too many big companies getting involved because there's still too much money to be made in oil and gas. If we start to divest from oil and gas now, whether that be at the pension level with the CPP, whether it be taxing banks that make a lot of money through the investment of fossil fuels, or whether it just be the divestment of our own incentives and subsidies for those industries, we need to start doing it now. We need to start applying that money towards the green technology and the research that's going to be required. And we need to mobilize that workforce immediately, not tomorrow, today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bruno. Over to you, Souza, for the 5th question, please.
Thanks, Rob. The next question is also a community question. Many young people and children are now experiencing high climate anxiety and are planning their future around the changing environment. Why should young people, from millennials to those who can't even vote yet, trust you and your party to protect our future and the future of our environment?
Am I up?
Yeah.
Fantastic question. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I know I will leave the planet in a much better shape than I found it. Environmental issues are really, really close to my heart. It's a crazy thing to think that nobody cares. Everybody cares about the environment. What are we going to do for the youth? The youth want to be able to buy homes. They want to be able to have jobs. The only way to do this is with a sustainable movement to a green economy. Ending fossil fuels, I think it's a pipe dream. We will do it. We will get there. The earth will be in much better shape. But again, our pipelines are safe. Our mining is sustainable. Our oil and gas is ethical. Nuclear, 4th generation, is definitely a solution. And yeah, so moving forward, Just lower the cost of living. The biggest thing with the PPC is lower income taxes. When the economy is booming, the government can lower the taxes, collect more revenue, put that money towards social programs, education, and healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. You know, I have a youth council, and I have since I first got elected. And those young people, right from the very first youth council I had in 2016, have been concerned about the environment. And I'm inspired by the actions that they want to take. In 2020, we had a number of events that were planned that had to get canceled because of the pandemic. But I will tell you, I've enjoyed working with them, and I bring the concerns that young people have to our government, to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of the Environment, to ensure that their voices are heard. So why should they trust the Liberal government? Why should they trust me? I think it's important that we walk the walk. I've been advocating for cycling, walking, public transit use long before I was a member of Parliament. I advocated for getting rid of single-use plastics like single-use water bottles and straws before I was an MP. This isn't because I'm an elected official that I'm doing this, it's because it's the right thing to do. I think it's really important that we listen to young people. I think they're the ones that are pushing us when it comes to the environment. The article I was mentioning earlier from Policy Options, it said Canadian voters want to elect climate sincere politicians, but identifying them isn't easy, especially as each party touts the merits of its climate plan. I encourage people to read this article. As I said, they gave us an 8 out of 10, the highest of all the political parties. So why should they trust us? We've already delivered since we were elected, and we will continue to deliver, and I will ensure that we do deliver on climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Bruno, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Yes. So why would you pick the Green Party? Let me think about that. We've had the only plan that should have had any sort of credibility when it comes to climate change since 1996. The other parties have borrowed from this plan over and time again without either looking at the fiscal accountability of the plan or without looking at the nature of the social progression of the plan. But one thing we do know for sure, that plan has made its way into the other parties' plans, and it is very visible today. Now, unfortunately, we don't have another 2 or 3 decades to wait to see which party is going to end up working out that plan. But I do know one thing. In the last election, our plan had been vetted by multiple organizations and costed, and it was the best at the time. However, this time we still have not had it costed because it was just released yesterday. Now, would I bet that it'll get costed properly? I guarantee you it will. We are a fiscally accountable party after all. We look at ways to generate the funds for our plans. So I think the Green Party has said it and has been saying it for 30 years. We are the party for this moment. The climate change needs us to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. And last but not least, Lene.
Thank you. So the New Democrats, we are committed to protecting nature and strengthening biodiversity, which I think are very, very closely linked to a lot of the future needs. I have an environmental waste management background. I did a thesis paper on soil bioremediation back in school, and I think there are a lot of long-term as well as quick wins in our policies. So some of the quick wins, banning single-use plastics, which Pam already touched on, some of the things like creating local food hubs and develop a national food waste strategy. So those are simple, quick wins. Monitor and protect pollinator health by partnering with farmers and communities. Address the disproportionate impacts of pollution and loss of biodiversity on marginalized communities through the creation of an Office of Environmental Justice. So these are just some really, simple and quick wins. But in addition to that, instead of giving subsidies to the big polluters, we should be taxing them and putting that money back into the community for climate action. So a lot of these things quick wins for the simple near future, and longer term results down the road as well. I also think it is a whole countrywide thing. So not just within federal government, but also provincial, municipal, working with Indigenous communities as well. So working together for a positive end result. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. Rob, would you like to ask the next question?
Thank you. So the next question, another one from the community, is about the proposed Highway 413 that would pave over hundreds of acres of green belts, many acres of farmland, natural areas. What is your position on protecting the green belt? I think we are now at Pam is the starting.
Thank you, and I'm so glad you asked this question. Building more highways will not solve congestion issues. What will solve congestion issues are investments in public transit, encouraging people to walk, to cycle, getting people out of their cars, not expanding highways that just grow to meet the traffic. I have been opposed to this project from the beginning. In March of 2021, I wrote a letter to Premier Doug Ford demanding that the construction be halted, listening to constituents as well who do not want the highway. I also worked with my federal colleagues to ask the Minister of the Environment to conduct a federal environmental assessment on the project. And I was quite happy that Minister Wilkinson did announce that we will be doing our own environmental assessment because, to quote Minister Wilkinson, there are clear areas of federal concern related to this project. This highway is going to cost $6 billion. It will pave over farm, forest, wetlands, a portion of the green belt, and add 17 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We can invest that $6 billion into the things that I've mentioned to help people move effectively with public transit, with other options. We do not need another highway, especially when we have the 407 sitting right beside it, which is underused now. So I'm opposed to the highway, and where we can in federal jurisdiction, I've done everything that I can to make sure that it doesn't get built. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Bruno?
I don't think it'll come to any surprise what the position of the Green Party would be on this highway. I think it's pretty clear that we wouldn't be for it. And I agree with the Liberal member. It is not going to be a solution to traffic. If anything, I would take the money that we would be requiring for this project and applying it to green energy and green transit solutions in the area. Perhaps even other alternatives now as technology is starting to provide other modes of transportation as well. So as we move towards that electric vehicle model, perhaps self-driving model, we will have less and less cars on the road going forward. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Bruno. Lene?
We definitely oppose. We fully support expanding transit, but it has to be in a way that is green. So, you know, extending the GO train line so it's more commutable, expanding trains and bus services. Also, you know, we want to make high-speed broadband more accessible so that people actually don't have to commute to the same extent as they did. Look at the pandemic. So many more people were working from home. And in that sense, you know, there were less greenhouse emissions during that. So, you know, we definitely oppose expanding the highway or creating this highway. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene. Gilbert?
Fantastic question. It's a bit of a loaded question. To start with, I am familiar with alternative transportation. I'm sure nobody else here is. Last year, I did work on the Ontario light rail transit from Port Credit to the I think the airport. So I mean, that's part of the solution. There's no question. As far as the highway goes, we had the 407. Taxpayers built it. Taxpayers subsidized it. and then our government sold it off, leased it off to a foreign entity. Let's start by at least stopping our bureaucrats, our politicians, our unelected bureaucrats from selling off our infrastructure. As far as the green belts, we increased the population of Ontario by 40% in the last 20 years. Highways is part of the solution. I would have to look. What you have to do is you have to give the project, take it away from the government, give it to a private sector like Elon Musk. We need more entrepreneurs in the open and free market to solve these problems. If we had a Canadian Elon Musk, this problem would be solved. But Canadians, politicians, I should say, not Canadians, somehow think the politicians have the answers and the unelected bureaucrats have the answers. Let entrepreneurs in an open free market solve these problems, and they will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gilbert. Next question over to you, Souza.
Thank you, Rob. The next question is, how will your party address the significant greenhouse gas emissions from buildings? What is your target, and how and well will these reductions be mandated? Sorry, Bruno, if you would like to start us off.
Thank you for the question. So in line with the rest of the Green Party's plan, the greenhouse gas emissions that we're targeting around 60% is, how we would look at any of the sustainable buildings that we work with in terms of implementing. In terms of policy, we'd be looking to see, can enhancements be made? Can they be strengthened? And of course, a lot of this work will have to be done, with different levels of government, of course, to change local code and whatnot in building practices. So, we would probably take a multi-partisan approach with multi-government entities to look at the problem and see how it can best be solved from a building and sustainability perspective moving forward, and ensure that it stays in line with those greenhouse gas emissions models. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Lene?
Hi. So we want to retrofit all buildings by 2050 and build 500,000 new affordable, energy efficient, climate-friendly housing units, and make every new building built in Canada net zero by 2025. So along with that, we want to give low interest loans and energy cost savings of about $900 per family per unit that they retrofit, et cetera. And so those types of things will really benefit people in the long run. And also, the retrofitting, we're reusing buildings that would otherwise maybe be torn down, et cetera. So there's like a reuse, recycle type concept. And with that, I know there are a lot of really great companies that are working on this type of retrofitting business. So I think that will be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene. Gilbert, would you like to answer next?
Thank you. And I wish the question was clearer on whether it was buildings or homes, but I'm going to assume it's both. I believe the People's Party of Canada want to lower taxes. When you lower taxes, put more money into the hands of the people, then they will make the right decision when it comes to whether they want to put solar panels on their home. Everybody wants to save money. They leave it up to the consumer to decide. Lower their taxes, they'll have more disposable income, and they will invest in solar panels or rain barrels or anything they want. When I moved here in 2004, there was a company in Oakville, Xenon, I think it was called, and they were going to build a subdivision that was 100% off the grid. And what's the biggest deterrent to these private corporations? I think they're now owned by General Electric. It's the government. Everybody has it backwards. Everybody thinks that the government has the solutions. Let the entrepreneurs in the open free market come up with the solutions. Let the Xenons, the Elon Musk, the entrepreneurs do what they need to do. There's enough intelligent, smart, educated people in Canada that the solutions will come from them. Overtax them, overwork them, make the cost of living too high, people stop forgetting about the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pam, would you like to answer next?
Thanks so much. And you know, there's two components to this. They're public buildings. And I'll deal with that first. Part of the price that we put on pollution returns 10% of the money back to municipalities, schools, hospitals, small and medium-sized businesses, colleges, universities, not-for-profits, and Indigenous communities to make them more energy efficient. And here in our community, in Burlington and in Oakville, they've used part of that money to make those kind of changes to the buildings themselves to make them more energy efficient. The other component of it is private homes, our homes that we own ourselves. We've implemented a number of programs to allow families to do green retrofits. We also in our platform have got a housing accelerator fund, and part of that will encourage public transit oriented development. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you, municipalities are the ones that determine where homes are built. But if we can provide incentives for municipalities to build around public transit hubs, and I know that both Oakville and Burlington do have plans to do that, then we will be able to reduce GHG emissions. Both municipalities have got plans in place to implement a reduction in GHG emissions from their public buildings. And we as the federal government can support that through grants, through infrastructure funding, and through the climate, the price of pollution and returning it back. Thank you so much.
Thank you all candidates for your answers. Rob, would you like to ask the next question?
Definitely. Thank you, Suha. This is kind of a tricky one, but I want to get it going up a little bit here. It's been great responses so far. So the 8th question is, what do you believe is the biggest weakness of your party's climate action plan? And if you were elected, how would the residents of Oakville, North Burlington know that you're going to do something to address that weakness? Like, what would you do to address that weakness in your party's climate action plan? I have Suha. Who's starting this one?
We're starting with Lene this time.
Okay, thank you. Lene, over to you. Sorry about that.
So I'm probably going to get in political trouble for saying this, but sometimes I feel like the NDP puts a lot of emphasis on the money that we're spending, but not how we're recouping the money. So a lot of our plans cost money, right? And so we're spending billions of dollars to make certain things happen throughout our platform. And, you know, I think probably our biggest failure is that we don't talk enough about how we're going to recoup the money and get it. So right now in our platform, we talk about making the big polluters pay, but exactly what is our action plan on doing that? So I feel from a fiscally responsible mindset that, you know, I would have to lay out, this is exactly how we're getting this. This is our accounts receivable payment plan, and this is how we're going to get the big polluters to pay, and then put that back into the climate action that we're proposing. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you, Lene. It is a tricky one. I hope I'm not getting you in hot water here with your parties.
Well, you know what? And I went first, so we'll give me some balance on that too, right? Thank you.
I like it. Get it out there, you know. Showing weakness is a sign of strength too. Gilbert, what's your perspective here?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I'll admit that I'm stumped. But I mean, I have multiple answers, but I want to be as truthful and honest as possible and as quickly as possible. A lot of people believe that it's too aggressive, and too aggressive in the fact that we believe that the government should be smaller and have less say, because we believe that every time the government gets involved, there's an inefficiency that are lost. Like, it's going to cost always an extra 15-20%. Like, I'll go back to Elon Musk. His biggest, what holds him back the most, other than the hedge funds, is the federal government. So the People's Party of Canada should realize that when a university comes up with a fantastic idea, we have to double down on it. And so it does happen that solutions do come from the government. And when they do, we have to make sure to praise that department, whether it's a university, whether it's a any environmental department. But generally speaking, we assume too much that all the solutions will come from society and culture. It's up to us to fix the environment. It's up to us. We have to stop virtue signaling. We have to stop living in these multi-million-dollar homes, take 2 cruises, of course, pre-COVID, and then pretend we're environmentalists. Like, show me that you're an environmentalist. If you take a cruise, I've never been on a cruise. I want to be on a cruise, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to pretend I'm an environmentalist. So it has to start, we have to push hard that the environmental issues will come from society and culture. And we have to also acknowledge that the environment issues will also come, parts of it, from the government. And when it does, we will support the governments. We will support those departments that are solving environmental issues. And not just that, when the government is doing a good job supporting a private corporation that is not taking any subsidies from the government, that's something else. We have to make sure that we will subsidize, assuming the economy is booming and the taxes are low, assuming that is happening, then we will consider, not my party, I'm just saying personally, we have to consider subsidizing when appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Pam?
Thank you so much. And I, you know, the Liberal plan, we will put the money in it to do the right thing. If we have a minority government like we did for the last 2 years, we have to rely on working with other parties to get things done. And sometimes there can be delays, things don't get passed. We almost didn't pass Bill C-12, which was a critical piece of legislation. And so, you know, working across party lines, I don't think is spelled out enough. One of the things I don't think we have enough focus on food and trade, which are 2 issues that impact the environment. And I don't think it's something that we talk nearly enough about. There's a little bit on food, there's a little bit on trade. This is something that was a focus of my youth council, and I'm very, very aware of it. And the other one is invasive species. And certainly our communities have been devastated by invasive species like emerald ash borer, and that's just one example. But unfortunately, there's no leadership from the federal government. I had the good fortune to sit on the Natural Resources Committee and did get urban forests included into our report to take action, federal action on invasive species, because I strongly believe that unless we have a national approach to these things, it's being done piecemeal by municipalities, and that bugs don't know borders. These invasive species don't know borders. So I think a more strategic approach to that would be really important. And all of those things are things that I have been working on and will continue to work on with my party and in Parliament across party lines.
Thank you very much, Pam. Bruno?
Well, thank you for the question. So with the Green Party, I think our biggest weakness is going to be in credibility in Parliament. And part of the reason is we haven't been there yet. We don't have much of a record yet, unfortunately. So that weakness, I believe, can be overcome in a couple of ways. I mentioned earlier an educational and awareness campaign, and this will help people understand exactly what the plan is and how it would get rolled out. I also mentioned that the fiscal accountability component would have to be observed. So if elected, I would endorse the idea of a political entity's accountability committee to ensure that pledges made to constituents and communities are observed. And when parties do not cross and work across party lines to come to a solution, a progressive solution on something like climate change, especially, that accountability is made very visible, that their involvement is not being made available, and that they are not trying to come to that solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Renee?
I thought I answered this one first.
Oh, is that where we started?
Yeah.
I've been listening to everybody. Sorry.
I'm
Thank
like,
you very much, Renee. Suha, back to you. Question 9, I think.
Sure. What is your plan to ensure all Indigenous reserves will have clean and sustainable drinking water systems? How will you ensure this plan gets turned into rapid, tangible action? We're going to start this one with Gilbert.
That's another fantastic question. And it's very disheartening. In 2004, I was at the Victor Diamond Mine site, and they employed a lot of Indigenous. And there was a lot of money. De Beers spent a lot of money. And somehow today, 20 years later, this was 2006, I think, they're still in the same mess. This solution, I'm not sure what the solution is. It's going to have to be hit at multiple levels of government. Money, again, is usually not the solution. Society and culture has to change. I'm not sure how. Obviously, potable water could be shipped in emergencies. That's not an issue. Well, it's an expensive issue. And I've worked on chlorination stations. I do the site development, so I don't know the technology, but I've worked in consulting firms that could build a chlorination station in no time, at least design it in no time. So I know it can happen. I've done that in year 2000. We did chlorination stations for, I think it was the town of Spring Hill. The technology is there, the solutions are there. Why it's being implemented, I don't know. But I know that I will look hard into the solutions. And I'm a big fan of rapid deployment. The private sector is really, really good at rapid deployment. If you want something done fast and nobody dies, hire the companies that are doing this, the rapid deployment, the mining industry, the oil and gas industry. They know the military, the Canadian military should be experts at fixing this problem really quickly until the proper engineering consultant firms can get the proper funding to fix the problem permanently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilbert. Pam, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. Water is life, and decades of neglect have led to the unacceptable reality that far too many First Nations have no reliable access to clean drinking water. There were 10 years of inaction under the Harper government, and chronic underfunding of infrastructure left our government starting from zero when we were elected in 2015. We have taken significant steps to right this wrong, and I, as Parliamentary Secretary at Indigenous Services Canada, I was part of that, but much remains to be done. When we were elected in 2015, there were 105 long-term drinking water advisories on reserve. We've supported First Nations community to lift 109 of those. There were 51, there's a remaining 51 long-term drinking water advisories in 32 communities, and there is a plan in place in each community to lift those. We will make whatever investments are necessary. We've invested over $4 billion in 535 water infrastructure projects, including 99 new plants and 436 upgrades, training, and employment. We also have prevented 188 short-term drinking water advisories from becoming long-term. We need to make sure that First Nations have the resources and trainings in place to prevent future long-term advisories from happening. And we will respect the terms of the agreement in principle to settle a class action suit and compensate First Nations deprived of drinking water in the amount of $1.5 billion. But I think it's really important to stress that we are working in partnership with First Nations. It's no longer the federal government telling First Nations what they need to do in order to fix the long-term drinking water advisory. We're working in partnership with them to make sure that there are long-term viable solutions in every community across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Bruno, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. I'll start with creating some context on the water. As an adventurer, as someone that likes to go portaging every year and explore our wilderness, sometimes we visit places we've been before and sometimes we don't. But one thing is for certain, when we're out there, water is our livelihood. So we have to take all measures that we're going to need in order to survive. So I can only imagine being a community that doesn't have drinkable water. And when we take a look at the record since 2015, we went from 105, added 58, and removed 101. So the way I see it, we're still not lifting all the water advisories we need to be lifting right now. In terms of a short-term plan, there's a lot we can do. There's very cost-effective solutions to be able to get at least drinking water in the meantime. And instead of spending so much money on fossil fuel subsidies, like 20 billion, why not spend some of that on water investment, compared to the 4 billion? Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Lene?
So, drinking water, to go to a tap and turn on a tap and have a glass of water is a huge human right. I think we need to make the full investment required to ensure clean water and lift all drinking water advisories for good right now, not years from now. That also includes supporting Indigenous-led water management training programs and water system operations as an immediate priority. We're committed to a clean water strategy that addresses the real issues at the ground level and works with the communities to put in long-term solution that ensures that the people in every part of Canada can live in safety and dignity. One Indigenous community has had to boil water for over 20 years. If any government, Liberal or Conservative, wanted to end it, they would have by now. Chief Rudy Turtle out of Grassy Narrows, he actually ran in the last election, and I met him a couple of times, and the fact that people are ill in his community every day from the water, it shouldn't be happening in Canada. We are sending people to Africa to remediate their water, and we have companies that can do this. And why it's not being lived at home and we're not helping these communities, it makes me just sad overall. Thank you.
Thank you all for your answers. Rob, would you like to ask the next one?
Sure. And the next question builds on that a bit and pivots away from the environment a little bit. But in the private sector, we look at ESG, or environmental social governance, and more we're seeing and realizing that they are linked in many ways. So the next question is, what are 3 specific actions that you and your party will take to address the historical injustice that Indigenous communities, the Black community, other minorities have faced in Canada? I think we're up with Pam starting up next.
Thanks so much for this question, because one of the things that we've seen is that over the last couple of years, a light has been shone on systemic racism in our institutions in a way that it hasn't before. The individuals that have been subjected to it have known for decades, forever. But as a society, we're now becoming aware of it. So I was one of the people that instituted a study on systemic racism and policing at the Public Safety Committee, and we spent months listening to witnesses. And one of the things that I was quite happy to see is Rcmp Reform. We know that Indigenous peoples, Black Canadians, other BIPOC individuals who are coming in contact with the police, they're in the criminal justice system. They're disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. So certainly reforming the RCMP is a top one. Joyce's principle, which will see $30 million to implement health transformation for Indigenous peoples. It's critical to when we see the way Indigenous peoples have been treated in our healthcare system. And here locally, I've held roundtables with the Muslim community, the Asian community. We have a number of individuals and groups in our society, in our communities, who are being subjected to racism. And so we need to take action on hate, on Islamophobia, on anti-Asian racism, on anti-Semitism. All of those things are priorities, not just for me, but for our government. And we've made historic investments in a number of different areas to end systemic racism in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Bruno?
I think some really basic things can be done at a community level that would take care of a lot of the problems we're seeing in these groups. And with the Indigenous in specific, I would be looking at the historical contexts. I think if we had an accountability court for that history, that looked at it, revised it, and changed it. Not only talked about it, but changed it in our records. That would already go a long way so that the new generations can be taught the truth to begin with. That is part of the process in the truth and reconciliation process. And I think we've had a very tough time coming to, grip with the truth. So beyond that, I would definitely be for, acting out those other action items on the reconciliation plan that have been kind of left to the side for now. And in terms of Rcmp reform, I don't know that Rcmp should be the police force that we work for Indigenous groups. They have a large territory typically at a federal level in terms of their mandate. And I don't know that they are always the best suited to deal with these community level issues. So maybe reallocating, reducing, reorganizing in general when it comes to policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Lene?
So human rights is at the basis of the NDP. We try to do everything that we action on with a human rights perspective. From an Indigenous point of view, we recognize that as original peoples of this country, Indigenous people have intimate connections to their homelands, territories, and resources, and have provided stewardship since a time of memory, best placed to protect cultural and biological diversity through control over their territory. So giving them the means to work within their territory and their livable space. We want to build reconciliation into the heart of our climate crisis, and to make sure that they are full and equal partners with everything we do. And just like any other minority group, but I feel like everybody is Canadian. We're all equal, but any minority group, as a woman, I'm a minority group, and we should all be treated with equalness, and to be able to work amongst each other and not have like a white supremacist mindset. So really, I think it's about everybody getting along, and we could action different things like having caucuses and different groups that we could speak to. Thank you.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Another fantastic question. I'm not sure. I have at least, I think, two good ones. Number one, we're not going to impose a COVID vaccine passport because right now the minority groups have a higher resistance to wanting to take the vax. Number two, we're going to stop the promotion that Canada is a racist country. If we're a racist country and the Liberals have been in power 18 of the last 28 years, how's it not their fault? And the third one, we want to build a strong Canada that works for everybody. So I think I answered specifically 2 out of 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now Suha, you move on to what will be the last question of the night, and then we will have closing comments after that.
Thank you, Rob. The last question is, if elected, how will you balance climate issues with other political issues, namely the economy, COVID-19, international standing, and more? Bruno, would you like to start us off, please?
Sure, great question. I think in the case of the Green Party, and if I was elected, the beauty is that we would already have a lot of plans for this kind of circular economy in our green recovery. Most of our components work with one another. In changing one, we are changing many things of our society. And so for starters, I think we would look at it from that perspective. How can transforming into green energy, green transit, away from these fossil fuels, into remote working, into incentivized jobs and education for that green transformation, it all starts to work together. I look at it kind of like earthships. I don't know if anyone's ever looked into these, but these are self-sustaining homes. They're homes that can harness the energy they need, they can harness what they need, they can recycle everything. And if we take an approach to communities, into provinces, into countries like this, we can create self-sustaining, eco-friendly environments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Just a reminder to all candidates, when you're done talking, please do mute yourselves. And Lene, you are next.
Okay. I believe that climate change links through everything that we're talking about. So as Oakville Burlington North continues to face population growth and expansion, as well as changes such as an aging population, I believe we have a great opportunity to mitigate climate change locally by taking advantage of this growth to ensure we grow in a way which also maximizes action and long-term solutions for the climate emergency. If elected, I would specifically advance this opportunity through federal investments in public transit, retrofitting all buildings, building climate-friendly, affordable housing, and ensuring new buildings are green, fully electrifying transit and municipal fleets, and supporting environmental protections, which will protect the natural areas that are abundant throughout Oakville, North Burlington. I'm also passionate about working with the cities to promote smart community planning and active transportation like walking or cycling. So all of these seem to link together for, you know, making everything affordable for everyday people and making the climate emergency start to get mitigated as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene. Next, we will have Gilbert, please.
Thank you. Another open-ended question that has very international standing. Right off the bat, I don't know why we have a negative international standing. Canada is like what Prince Edward Island is to Canada is what we are to the world. Do we really want to go and destroy the entire economy of Prince Edward Island? If we did, it's so insignificant to Canada from a size and ecological footprint that it would make a big difference. I think we're Canada's 1 to 2% of the global emissions. So of course, we're going to fight the environment. Of course, we're going to lower emissions. Of course, we're going to move to a green economy. But at what cost to the general public are we going to do this? How much, where do we draw the line when it comes to destroying the economy with the lockdowns? So again, I don't like the international standings because I believe we have a fantastic international standing. And yeah, so the economy. Again, a booming economy saves the planet. I know it sounds counterintuitive. You want green projects to move ahead, you must have it doesn't have to be necessarily a booming economy, but you don't have to have a massive recession is not the solution. And international standings, economy, and COVID. I'm not sure how all three tie together. We've always had viruses, we'll have more viruses. We learned to live with SARS in 2003. We did not have to shut down the economy in 2003. So I don't believe we have to now. And I don't necessarily believe that the lockdowns worked. Thank you. How's that?
Thank you. Do you mind muting yourself? Thank you. Pam, you are next.
Thanks so much. The environment, the economy, and our health go hand in hand. So I don't believe that you can separate climate issues from any of these other political issues. I believe that climate needs to be part of every aspect of what a government does. We have a costed plan, which means that we will deliver. When you look at the climate impacts on Indigenous peoples, on peoples living in poverty, the impact, they've been disproportionately impacted by climate change. If you don't think there's a cost to climate change, I would say to you, there's a cost of inaction. We look at the floodings that have happened in both Burlington and Oakville, and the millions of dollars that our municipalities have had to spend just here locally. But this is happening across the country. Look at the wildfires in British Columbia and the money that we're having to put in to fight those wildfires. There's a huge economic cost. There's a health cost of inaction on climate change. So I don't think that you can separate them. I think that climate needs to be a focus of everything that we do, both as individuals, but as a government. And so that's why as I said, I ran for office because I was concerned about the environment. I've always said that environment the economy go hand in hand, but too often we forget about the health aspect of that, because if we have a healthy environment and a healthy economy, we also have healthier people. So we need to make sure that we're taking action on all three of these. We need to protect nature. I didn't talk about that we're going to plant 2 billion trees, 50,000 of them by Conservation Halton. So I think I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thank you to all of our candidates for answering all of these questions. We were able to fit in a lot more than we were expecting, so it is greatly appreciated. Next, each candidate is going to have 1 minute to share their closing statement. So we would like to start off with Lene, please.
Great, thank you. The pandemic has taken a toll on Canadians. We're worn out and anxious about the future. Jagmeet Singh fights for people. He doesn't answer to the powerful. In the pandemic, he delivered real help for workers and families. And as Prime Minister, he'll make the ultra-rich pay their fair share so we can build a recovery that benefits everyone. Affordable pharmacare, dental care, housing, cell phones, education, sick pay, clean water, reconciliation, climate action, just to name a few. Justin Trudeau and Aaron O'Toole won't do it. Jagmeet and I will. We know that better is possible. We're optimistic and determined. With Jagmeet and the NDP, we can have a future that includes everyone, that's more affordable, equal, hopeful, and secure. I'm here for Oakville, North Burlington, and will fight for you. So when you go to the polling station to cast your ballot, think of me, Lene Dupuis, for the NDP.
Thank you, Lene. It was my mistake. We actually have 2 minutes for closing statements. So if you have anything else to add, feel free to do so.
Well, I said the nice rhyming sentence at the end, so I can't add to that. Sorry.
No,
but thank you.
No worries. That was my mistake. Thank you so much. Gilbert, would you like to go? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, cutting a minute causes lots of stress, so good job,
Sorry.
Vienna. And that's okay. Thank you, and thank you everybody for the invitation. And it was a very fun evening. So I'd like to, of course, thank the event organizers and the candidates for attending. And we accept that there's a cost, but all we're asking is, you know, where do we draw the line? There has to be a spot where we decide that enough is enough. Anyways, my experience trained as an engineering technologist taught me to be diligent with research and be mindful of the limitations to available resources. So I like looking at the source of the problem. I find a lot of governments don't look at the source of the problem. My duties as a father always reminds me that what I teach my children today will be with them for the rest of their lives. Each party here tonight wants to tax and spend. We work half our year just to pay our taxes. Adding to the debt is taxes of the future. It's morally unacceptable to burden future generations with debts they will not incur, with debts they did not incur. Solutions will be found only by including a diverse set of ideas and opinions, from the Ivy League professor to the backyard mechanic to the fathers and mothers of everyday Canada. I worked in nuclear power plants, so I do believe fourth generation nuclear must be part of the solution moving towards a low emission economy. I hate to say this, but a lot of environmentalists do not want nuclear. I think Canada has one of the best nuclear programs, so I truly believe it's part of the solution. I believe that clearing up federal bureaucracy that stifles innovations, green solutions, and businesses is also part of the solution. I'm your People's Party of Canada candidate, returning candidate, and I want to be your pro-innovative, pro-green MP. I will champion legislation that improves the economy and our environment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Pam, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers for bringing us together tonight and hosting this debate, to my fellow candidates for the lively debate and the sharing of ideas. And I want to thank everyone joining both live and when watching the recording. This is a critical election and we can't afford to take it for granted. As we recover and rebuild from the pandemic, it's time to decide together what the future of Canada looks like. If you want a progressive future that includes everyone, you have one clear choice. The Liberals are the only party with a real plan to move Canada forward on issues that matter most to Canadians. Let's vote to put Canadians' health and safety first, to build more affordable homes, to support women and families and give every child the best possible start with $10 a day childcare, to fight climate change and leave a safe and healthy environment for our children and grandchildren, to keep moving forward on reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, to unite to fight systemic racism, and to build a green, resilient economy. The truth is we simply can't afford to move backwards, not in the fight against COVID or the climate crisis, not on gun control, not on healthcare or childcare, not for seniors, workers, or families. This is our moment to decide together how Canada moves forward. In Oakville, North Burlington, there's only one choice if you care about the environment, healthcare, childcare, women's rights, and a green economy. For the last 6 years, I've been your progressive voice in Ottawa with a proven track record of success, and we need to continue the momentum together. Choose forward for everyone by voting Liberal. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And last but not least, Bruno, would you like to share your closing statement?
I'd be happy to. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the University Women's Networks. Great to see more women involved with politics and governance in general. I do want to say a few things. This debate alone has already pointed out some of the issues that we have. For example, the remark that was made by the People's Party representative, Canada is now the 7th place. That means we produce almost as much as any of the other big polluters like India and China, okay? In fact, in Canada, we have the highest carbon footprint of any of the G20 nations. Think about that. It's not necessarily the pollution we're creating here, it's also our lifestyles and everything we buy from overseas and then hold other countries responsible for. We have the highest 18.58 tons per person here. Okay, that's not even close to China's. It's 2.5 times theirs. 30 years have gone by of improper management. It's been a merry-go-round of posturing and promises, and nothing's been delivered. I wish I could agree with Pam and say that this is the only candidate you have for any sort of meaningful change, but it's not. Unfortunately, it's not. And the Green Party has proved time and time again that our platforms were on point in advance of what happened, and no one is adopting them. I don't know what to say other than vote Green. I know it's impossible, but I know together we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all candidates, for your participation. Rob, would you like to give us some concluding statements as well?
Sure. Thank you, Suha. And as you said, thank you, everyone. I want to thank also the community. There were a lot of questions. All the questions that we asked tonight were submitted by the community. Questions that the constituents, the residents of Oakville, North Burlington wanted to hear from the candidates. So thank you, community. Also, thank you, candidates and your teams. We really appreciate you participating this evening. The work and thought that went into it, the pivoting when we had technical difficulties, the laughing about those technical difficulties, and also be willing to go and take extra questions that the community asked. That was great. And also gratitude to our partners, GreenPAC, CFUW Oakville, CFUW Georgetown, Sustainable Milton, the Halton Hills Public Library, participation from Burlington Green. We truly appreciate all that support in helping us organize tonight's debate, and for being a part of the 100 debates on the environment. I think it's fantastic that we're able to bring candidates together from so many ridings across Canada to debate and discuss the environment. Also want to thank my co-moderator, Suha Khan, and our timekeeper, very important, Rose Wrong. Thank you for keeping us on track. And also just on behalf of the entire team at the Halton Environmental Network, thank you. Thank everyone for your time this evening. Please stay connected. Check out the Halton Environmental Network website. There's so much that we can do in our community, in Halton, in all the municipalities around climate action. So if you want to get involved, check that out. Most importantly, don't forget to vote. Get out and vote. Advanced polls open September 10th, voting day September 20th. If you want to know how to vote, check out Elections Canada website, get out and vote. But thank you, everyone. I think this was a fantastic conversation, real honest too. I appreciate the honesty, great discussion. So thank you, everyone. Good evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All the best to all my fellow candidates too. Take care.
You too.
On
Bye.
the campaign trail. Cheers.